One of the most useful tools in the shop is the thickness planer. This is my Grizzly 15-inch planer with helical cutters. So we've had it in the shop for about a year now. It is a great machine, and we've planed a lot of different kinds of woods through it. Now, Grizzly has been a big supporter of this channel, and they have a great deal for my viewers, which is 10% off this machine if you use the code DARBIN10. Now that is a nice discount. Now, a year is a decent amount of time to use a tool, so I thought this would be a good time to go over what my experience has been like so far. Because when you first get a tool, you know, it's really easy to get super excited. And it's not until you really use it a bit and put it through its paces that you really get an idea of what it's like, what you like about it and what you don't like about it. First of all though, before anything else, there may be some of you out there who are wondering, like, what is a planer? Well, it is a tool that enables you to mill down a board to a specific thickness throughout. So you start with one flat side, and this is often accomplished with a jointer. A jointer and a planer go really well together. Although you don't have to. I mean, you could just make a simple jig for the planer where you have an even board, and then you put your uneven board on top of that, attach that, run it through until you get like the flat side, and then you can remove the jig, flip it around, and then run it through again. So a jointer is not really necessary, although it is a very nice tool to have. So a planer will clean up the wood and give you a specific even thickness throughout. Okay, so this is the G1021X2 Grizzly 15-inch Extreme Series planer with spiral cutting head. This is gonna be such a nice addition to the shop. So just got the machine off the packaging and just use this metal bar, a 2x8, to slowly kind of bring it down a bit. So this is the planer. It is made in cast iron, it weighs 580 pounds. It is a 3 horsepower machine that runs on 220 volt with a single phase motor. It has anti-kickback fingers, bed rollers and return rollers, dust port for dust collection, and you definitely need dust collection with this machine. Here's the wheel for lowering or raising the bed, and there's a measurement tape here as well. In terms of blades, this machine has helical carbide cutters. In order to access the blades, you remove this panel, and this is what they look like. It's easy to turn the cutters around if you need to, although I haven't needed to at this point, even with the amount of wood that we put through it. And when it comes to cutters, I mean, you have two basic options. You have the traditional straight knives, or you have the more modern carbide cutters. Straight knives are cheaper, however they dull a lot faster, which means that you have to sharpen them more frequently. So you have to take them out of the machine, sharpen them, and then put them back. So that is a bit of a hassle, and the finish of the cut is not as nice. Carbide cutters, on the other hand, they are more expensive, however they also last like 10 times longer. And that is 10 times longer per side, and there are 4 sides, so more like 40 times longer. I mean, here you just basically turn the cutters around when one side becomes dull. So it's just a lot less hassle with this setup, but it is also more expensive. In this planer, the cutters are helical, which means they're placed at an angle. So that means that you don't have to be concerned with the grain direction when you plane, as opposed to with straight knives, where the direction of the grain will impact the quality of your cut. Now, before I had this planer, I had a lunchbox planer for years and years, and I planed a ton of wood through that. So I don't really have any experience with other planers in this same league. But when I got this upgrade, I mean, there were a couple of things that stood out right away. However, I guess the biggest thing was definitely the finish you get. And that is due to the carbide cutters. I mean, the finish is almost perfect right off the planer. I mean, you could pretty much put on your shellac or your polyurethane right off the bat, which is a big difference from straight knives, which is also not as good with figured wood. And if you do happen to get a nick in one of the knives, then you're gonna get those lines that you know, go across the wood. Whereas with these cutters, that just doesn't happen. So the result is quite impressive. The other difference with these carbide cutters is the sound level. They are a lot quieter than straight knives. And I don't know how much is related to the cutters and to the machine, but my old planers used to squeal like and have this really loud sound, especially when I ran difficult wood through it, and that is just not the case with this at all. So it's definitely a lot more quiet than my old setup. And I guess the other thing that just really stands out when you compare it to my old lunchbox planer is the stability and the heft of it. I mean, with my old planer, it's always kind of tricky and difficult to plane really heavy and really long boards through it, and it never felt quite secure. But this thing is like a rock. It doesn't move at all. You can very easily plane really long and thick and difficult wood through it without any issues whatsoever. So I really like that about this machine. Another couple of things that I really like about this model and this design is the fact that the whole machine is made in metal. And throughout this year, I mean, there hasn't been any nicks or knacks or anything. I mean, it looks and it works as if it was brand new. Another feature that is really handy, especially when you're working with heavy lumber, are these return rollers on top of the machine. They're really practical because once you run a board through the planer, you just put it on top and then you roll it back and then you can run through it again. So that just means that there's a lot less walking around carrying these heavy boards, so it's a lot easier on your back, which is nice. And the last thing that I really like about this machine, and that's kind of true for all the Grizzly machines, and that's just the look of it. It has this really kind of old-fashioned, classic look. It looks like it belongs in a classic workshop. The colors and the labels and the signs and all the little details, they're really nice, and I really appreciate that. So anyway, I was kind of thinking about all the things that I like about this machine. I mean, the heft and the quality of the cut and the rollers and the design and all that. But then I was thinking, well, what is it that I don't like about it? And the funny thing is that there's actually nothing that I don't like about it. There's nothing that has bugged me or annoyed me, nothing that has chipped or doesn't work quite right. I guess the thing is that it is just, you know, much more expensive than my old planer. But on the other hand, I mean, you get what you pay for. This is a very different machine and a different league altogether. I mean, this is designed for heavy work. Because I guess that's the thing. Cost is kind of a relative question when it comes to woodworking, because it all depends on what kind of work that you do. If you consider yourself a serious woodworker, or perhaps you would like to become one, then at some point you're going to deal with rough-sawn lumber. And when you're dealing with rough-sawn lumber, having a good quality thickness planer is just going to make the milling process of the wood so much faster and more convenient. I mean, the difference is night and day. And obviously there are a lot of reasons to go to a lumber yard and pick up more rough-sawn wood, as opposed to going to more of a finished woodworking store and pick up, you know, wood that's been surfaced on all four sides. And I guess the primary reason for that is cost. Although, I mean, there may be some things that you can't find, like certain thicknesses and different kinds of wood at more of a finished woodworking store. But in terms of cost, rough-sawn lumber from someone on Craigslist or at a lumber yard, and I'm talking like maple or walnut or something like that now, that will probably run you $3, $4, $5 a board foot, something like that, you know, depending on the situation. But if you go to a finished woodworking store, then you're gonna pay, I don't know, 2.5 times that, maybe $9 a board foot or more than that. So the difference is quite substantial. Of course, there is going to be more waste when you mill down rough-sawn wood, so you do have to take that into account. But it is still a big difference in cost. I mean, let's say, for example, that you are picking up wood for a workbench or a dining table or something like that. So that means that you're gonna, you know, spend maybe $600 as opposed to spending like $1,300 for wood. And if you do that a couple of times, well, that can add up rather quickly, and a good quality planer really makes sense in that situation. So kind of an interesting question in that sense. Overall in the shop, I would say that this is probably our second most used tool. First comes the table saw that we use all the time, and then second is probably the planer. And we use this planer a lot more than we used to use the other thickness planer, because that was always kind of a hassle to get out and not something you were like super eager to do. But here it is so stable, it sits there, and it's really just super convenient to run through it. I guess there's a couple of things that you should keep in mind if you are considering getting something like this. First of all, you need like good dust collection. I have a Grizzly 3 horsepower dust collector hooked up to this, which works really well. But you'll need good dust collection or else you'll have issues. Also, you need 220 volts and a 20 amp circuit. Installation was relatively straightforward, I have to say. The only thing is that it is a really heavy machine, which is also why it's so good. It's so hefty and stable, but it's really kind of heavy to move around and set up. And I think that is about it. A 1 year later review. Don't forget, if you're interested in something like this, make sure to use the code Darbin10 at checkout for 10% off. And that code actually applies to all the Grizzly tools that I have. So the bandsaw, the lathe, the jointer, and the dust collection. So something to keep in mind, and I'll put a link in the description to those tools as well. But yeah, let me know if you have any questions. If there was something that I didn't quite cover in this video, I'll be happy to answer them. And thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye!